I Hate Politics is a podcast dedicated to exploring a human activity we love to hate. We look at human life, culture, economics closest to us in our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and in our local governments. Together, we'll explore how politics is central to getting things done in societies where we treasure diverse views and preferences. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. I've spent my life studying politics, and I know this. Unless we want to live in a dictatorship or a monarchy, we are stuck with politics. Politics is more than just Trump, Biden, or elections. It's how we fix potholes, make our streets safer, where we put our schools, and decide who goes to them. It's about coming together as a community. It's about us. Let's go find those stories. Local news has been in decline for more than 2 decades. In Montgomery County, the Gazette newspapers, the Montgomery Journal, and others closed down. The Washington Post has shifted its local coverage mainly to local news with national importance and how national news events impact locally. There are many reasons for this: the rise of the internet, the death of the classifieds market, the nationalization of news. In Montgomery County, which is home to many national playmakers, there is much teeth gnashing about the absence of local news. But the real deal are the big national and international issues around which professionally run advocacy groups are organized. The Montgomery County government financially supports its own media outlet called MyMC Media, and there are several blogs and Facebook groups that have supplanted the decline in local news outlets. Among the most prominent are Dan Reed's blog, Just Up the Pike, which focuses on urbanism, and Alex Sironis' Moco Show, which started as an MCPS weather closings advisory and now focuses on business openings and closings. In this landscape, Bethesda Magazine and its offshoot Bethesda Beat have been a giant. Started in 2004 by media executive Steve Hull and his wife Susan, they have now sold the operations to Scott and Jillian Copeland, who are a Rockville-based real estate developers. Following the sale, Steve Hull agreed to an interview to look at the challenges and the future of local media outlets. Also in this episode, we use music from Montgomery County native and now DC singer-songwriter Emily Hall. You can find her music on Spotify. If you want to showcase your music on the podcast or know someone else who does, please email ihppod@gmail.com. Big news. Maryland has decided to scale back Governor Hogan's plan to expand toll lanes on the Capital Beltway and I-270. The project will now focus on replacing the American Legion Bridge, which connects Maryland to Virginia and extend north on I-270 through Shady Grove, but exclude any expansion of the Beltway itself, which would have affected neighborhoods in Silver Spring, Kensington, and parts of Bethesda. Now, the plan is to build 2 toll lanes in each direction going up 270. Maryland Transportation Secretary Greg Slater wants a scaled-down project to demonstrate viability of the public-private partnership model, where a private company builds the toll lanes and gets to keep the tolls for a number of years. There is significant opposition in Bethesda and Rockville to building the toll lanes all along the southern end of the 270 corridor, which has traffic congestion, but is mostly a 12-lane highway. The real traffic bottleneck is actually on the northern half of 270, which has far fewer lanes. The new plan, it seems, is more interested in extending the Virginia toll lanes to Maryland rather than provide an actual transportation solution. The plan has no transit component. Look out for an entire episode on toll lanes soon. County Executive Mark Elrich and the County Council appear to be pushing ahead with rechristening the SRO program that placed armed police officers in every high school to a community model where armed police officers will remain outside of the school building but patrol in the community. In reopening news, the state of Maryland is lifting restrictions on indoor dining and other activities, but Montgomery County is likely to hold on for a little longer, though there are indications that they may reconsider by May 29. In D.C., indoor venues will be allowed to operate at 50% capacity starting May 21st and full capacity by June 11th. When these changes were initially announced, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser also removed indoor masking orders, but the masking has been reinstated since. It's getting easier and easier to get vaccination appointments. Now that 12 to 15-year-olds can get the vaccine, the county, state, and local pharmacies and many private providers are offering the shot. Sign up, DMV. In election news, the city of Hyattsville voted on May 11th to elect mayor and council members. Results are not out yet. We will report when they are. In more election news, the races in Montgomery County are heating up. County Executive Mark Elrich and David Blair have announced a rematch of 2018. This week, the race for the open at-large county council seat being vacated by term-limited Hans Riemer saw the entry of local activist Kristen Mink, who famously confronted Trump's EPA director, Scott Pruitt, in a restaurant. She's going up against Brandy Brooks, who ran for county council in 2018 and missed narrowly. Brooks and Mink have not filed any financial reports yet, but Brooks reported on her website that she raised $33,000 in the first week after launching her campaign in February, more than meeting the $10,000 in-county threshold for public financing. Kristen Mink, meanwhile, has over 27,000 Twitter followers, which is many times more than any sitting county council member. If she can convert her social media reach into actual donations and organizing, this has already become the county council race to watch out for. Both Brooks and Mink belong to the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Expect this race to be a tough slog. In other county council races, Natalie Fanny Gonzalez, the vice chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board, is running in District 4, which is Nancy Navarro's seat. Navarro, like Riemer, is now termed out. In Up-County District 2, Craig Rice is termed out, and Marilyn Balcombe, who ran previously in 2018, has announced her bid. There are others also preparing campaigns, and we will report when they announce. The primary election is now about a year out, scheduled for June 28, 2022. In Montgomery County and even some statewide races, the primary can be more important than the general elections because the county and the state are so heavily Democratic. The real political fight isn't against Republicans, but within Democrats with differing visions. The governor's race has somewhat different dynamics, and we will report on that. At I Hate Politics, we'll not only be covering local and state and some federal races, we are planning a series of in-depth candidate interviews. Having personally been through the speed dating experience offered by candidate forums, I'm asking candidates to pick a topic that shows them off at their best, and I will interview them in depth on that subject. If you are a candidate or have a favorite one, please reach out at ihppod@gmail.com or on Twitter at ihppod. I'll be back with Steve Hull, the founder and editor of Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat, who has now sold his operations to Jillian and Scott Copeland of Rockville. Steve Hull, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you. It is great to be here.
Well, let's jump into it. Why did you sell Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat?
There were a couple reasons. Let me tell you, it was a bittersweet decision, but it was the right decision for me and for my wife, Susan. We started Bethesda Magazine 17 years ago.
Right.
And Bethesda Beat 7 years ago, and Arlington Magazine 10 years ago. We love what we do, but it's an extraordinary amount of work. We are both in our 60s and, while we loved what we were doing, we also didn't want to work that hard and had other interests we wanted to pursue. But maybe most importantly, we found the buyers who we think were the perfect stewards for the future of what we do. and we didn't want to pass on that opportunity because we think they will be able to take what we do to the next level in terms of serving the community.
To the extent that you can share, and this is really a question about local media more generally, has Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat and the operation been commercially sustainable?
We've been very fortunate. We started Bethesda Magazine 17 years ago. My wife, Susan, and I started it in the basement of our house. Wasn't exactly a garage like in Silicon Valley, but it was still in our house. The number of people back then told me how crazy we were to do that. I left a senior level executive position at Atlantic Media to start a magazine in the basement of our house, and about 90% of all new magazines fail. So
Right.
People told me all the time how crazy I was, and I thought, we're really smart. Well, now, 17 years later, people tell me all the time, you were so smart. And I think I was crazy. We had 4 kids to put through college, and starting a magazine is a really risky thing. But
Right.
we picked a really good market serving Montgomery County. Bethesda Magazine has been very profitable, nicely profitable. And what it allowed us to do was to start Bethesda Beat, because Bethesda Beat's not going to be profitable. And it's lost money every year in 7 years, but it is about serving the community, as is Bethesda Magazine, but the profits from Bethesda Magazine allow us to do Bethesda Beat. Our approach, and it's going to be the same approach with our new owners, is we want to get it to break even, Bethesda Beat, and we're close. And once we get it to break even, we're going to hire another person. So we'll start losing money again, but we'll be serving the community better.
Sure.
And then we'll work to get it to break even, and then we'll hire another person. So
Correct.
that is going to be our approach.
So you said there's a difference between the digital side of the house and the paper side of the house. Was Bethesda Magazine successful commercially from the beginning? Or did you?
We started going cash flow positive after the 3rd issue.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yes. We've been really fortunate. I mean, we started with 3 people, and now, including Arlington, because we're still together, we are at 26 people.
Well, that's incredible. You did mention though that you saw your market as Montgomery County.
Yes.
But you called your magazine Bethesda.
It was a really difficult decision and difficult discussions 18 years ago when we were planning this. We live in Chevy Chase. A lot of our audiences, and especially at the beginning, was in Bethesda and Chevy Chase. So we called it Bethesda Magazine, but on the bottom of the cover of the magazine, it lists the towns we serve, which is Rockville, Gaithersburg, Kensington, Silver Spring. Well, in fact, over time, we have intentionally increased our coverage in the magazine, but even more so in Bethesda Beat, to cover all of the county. And that confuses people sometimes. It is our goal with Bethesda Beat in particular over time to be able to cover literally all of the county, to have an up-county reporter, to have an east-county reporter. I know with our new owners, we'll be looking at, does the name Bethesda Beat still make sense?
Let's step back into history a little bit. And so 18 years ago, you were giving up a senior executive job, and you wanted to start a magazine, which, as you pointed out, was a very risky thing to do. What was the rationale? I mean, where was Montgomery County at that time? Where was the Washington, D.C. region at that time? And why did you think of doing that?
I was in my mid-40s, and I just knew in my heart that I was an entrepreneur, and I knew it was now or never. There was also something missing. I loved my job at the Atlantic, but there was something missing. And that is, the larger organization you get into in your job, and the higher you go up the ladder, generally you are removed from producing anything and from having relationships and contact with your customers or clients. Mm-hmm. And I am so much more someone who is wants to be producing something and wants to know the people whose lives we're affecting and we're doing business with. I said to someone once that I'm much better suited to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. This has changed my life in so many ways because it's so rewarding when you're at this truly local level. You see the impact of what you do. Sometimes you see it in the sense of people really unhappy with you, and I get those calls all the time. But even that is rewarding just because it's the give and take. Gotten to know so many of our advertisers, so many people in the community, so many of our readers. So it was absolutely the right decision for me in terms of professionally. It was also an opportunity in the market. Back then, 17 years ago, the Gazette newspapers were still doing well, and I greatly admired them. People said, why would you start the magazine? There's the Gazette. But there's a big difference in the kind of storytelling a magazine does, like ours, and a weekly newspaper. The weekly newspaper is obviously about the breaking news, and the magazine is able to step back, do storytelling from a much different perspective. We do frequently 5,000 words stories. We even did once a 12,000 word story on one elementary school, Daly Elementary School in Germantown. And it's also a different kind of advertiser. So we virtually never competed with the Gazette for advertising. But then the next real opportunity came 8 years ago when we started thinking about Bethesda Beat. And that was driven by, we could see that the Gazette papers were in serious trouble and they were failing. So a year before they closed, we started Bethesda Beat, and we started it with one reporter who was doing 3 or 4 stories a day. And then when the Gazette newspapers did close, unfortunately, and I mean unfortunately, a year later, Montgomery County, which is the 42nd largest county in terms of population in the country, didn't have a newspaper or a newspaper that covered a big part of the county. And Bethesda Beat has stepped in. And we now have 3 reporters. Before the year's out, we'll be hiring a 4th reporter. And we can't do sports and we can't do some of the things the Gazette was doing. But I think we do a pretty good job of covering the news, the day-to-day news in the county.
Can you talk about how you balance the different demands of Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat? They seem like they are different products.
In our office, on one side of my office is the Bethesda Magazine editor's office. There's 2 editors, and I work with them every day. And it's bi-monthly magazine. We plan it. We had a planning meeting yesterday where we were talking about the September-October issue, and we're having another meeting every 2 weeks. And 2 weeks we're talking about the stories for the November-December issue. And they will sometimes spend 4 days working on one story. On the other side of me is the Bethesda Beat team, and they average 8.5, 9 stories a day.
Wow.
Yes, I filled in yesterday as the editor. Managing editor took the day off, and I edited 8 stories in one day. My head is still spinning. And I don't know how he does it day after day. And so it is the dichotomy of that is, first of all, it makes my job interesting, but it's definitely a different set of skills and a different outlook, that are required on our staff. But I think it's been healthy for us. We recognize what was happening, obviously, in the world in terms of the move, both of readership and advertising dollars from print to digital. And my view was there's going to be competition for our print advertising dollars. I'd rather have the competition come from us rather than someone else. And we've been very fortunate that our print advertising has actually done really well, but we've also picked up lots of digital advertising.
Is there an Arlington version equivalent of the Bethesda Beat, or is that just Montgomery County?
Yes, there is. It's actually a year older, I believe, than Bethesda Beat. It's called ARL now. So it actually made it, Arlington Magazine doesn't have the opportunity. I think it would be really difficult to compete with, I call it ARL now.
Is it as big as Bethesda Beat, or is it smaller?
I think traffic-wise, it's about the same. They have a smaller staff, and they don't do as much coverage of county government things. The beauty, of course, of digital is that it's measurable. And every day I get a report from our web producer about the traffic from the previous day and about what stories are trending. And then we get a report about our newsletter, what the open rate is. So it's totally measurable, which gives you such important information you need to make decisions and to see what's working and what's not. So many media organizations these days are driven by that, by those metrics. And so they only want to do stories that produce the highest number of people reading. Right. And we definitely want to do those stories. And for us, it's stories about restaurants, crime, and celebrities that get the most page views.
Okay, good to
And
know.
actually, school-related ones are just slightly far behind. We hit the trifecta about 2 years ago when Kellyanne Conway from the Trump White House
Right.
was eating at a Bethesda restaurant, and she claimed she was attacked by a patron. So we had restaurant, celebrity, and crime in one story. We have of our three reporters, we have one who does restaurants and crime, and we have two, the two others, one county covers county government and the other county covers the school board. And the county government beat in particular gets the smallest number of page views, but it's also a really important beat. And it is the people who read that content in the school content, they are our most loyal readers. They are the ones that read the most stories. They are the ones that have become members of our membership program, which is really important to our financial sustainability. So it's an interesting dichotomy trying to juggle, what do you write about that gets the most readers, and what do you write about that's really the most important for the community?
Right. I mean, you've really hit the central dilemma in for any media organization, especially local one. I mean, there is Moko Show, right? That is primarily focused on restaurant openings and that kind of thing. And so they have a huge following.
Yeah.
And then there is I Hit Politics, which is not focused on restaurants. So in that, we are two different kind of entities, but you seem to have brought them together.
Our readers, those who love everything about county government things, they love reading about restaurants too. And our crime stories get a lot of readership as well.
Wow.
It's trying to get the balance. We're very fortunate that we get a lot of, we get about 450, 500,000 Bethesda Beat readers a month. And that fluctuates. This has actually been a slow news month. So this will be a little bit lower. That's a lot of readers, and it's enough to sustain our advertising. So we're not, like a lot of media organizations, we have the luxury of not having to just focus on the stories that will bring in the most page views.
Yeah, so this is an interesting model because it's very hard to put together, and you seem to have done it successfully. And this cross subsidy between entertainment stories and crime stories. Question is that because it's cross subsidy, when times are harder, the weaker part gets cut.
We have not done that. I mean, we just went through a tough year, obviously, as
right.
A lot of businesses, and in particular media businesses, and particularly local media businesses.
Sure.
We actually, as soon as the pandemic started, I asked our finance manager to model out, so this was in March, what the rest of the year would look like if our advertising was down 70%, if we would still be in business at the end of the year. And we would have had about $16 left in the bank, but we would have been in business. But that was the worst case scenario. We were very fortunate. We were down about 20%. It's hard to imagine a business where you say, woohoo, we were down 20%, but in our sales meeting, our end of year sales meeting last year in December, that's exactly what I said to our sales staff. I said, great job. We were only down 20%. Where under normal circumstances, if we're not up every issue, it's like, what's wrong? So we did cut salaries. We didn't lay off anyone. We have paid back all of our employees for the money they lost. We have not been in a situation where we have had to face, in a really difficult time, cutting back on our coverage. We have this membership program to help support what we do. And it's like, think about NPR or something like that. It's like a membership there, but without the tote bag or a mug. And we went from about 400 members before the pandemic to about 1,200.
That's great.
And because people were relying on our coverage first of the pandemic, and then add on some of the issues that were going, everything with the schools and public school openings. And
sure.
Then you add in the whole troubled vaccination rollout. People have really been relying on what we've been doing. So in a difficult year, we were the most popular we've ever been, but it was really difficult to monetize. But now we're in a position, I think, even though the audience is starting to level off, where we'll be in a stronger position to monetize that audience.
And I am free, I am home, and all is well. I am free, I am home, and all is well. I am free, I am home, and all is well. And I am free, I am home, and all is well. I am free, I am home, and all is well.
That's singer-songwriter Emily Hall.
I am free, I am home.
Let me ask you about your advertisers. Where do they come from? Are they local? Are they particular kinds of industries?
It's a 99% local.
Wow.
Occasionally we'll get a regional advertiser, but we're just not big enough for them. Frankly, they generally go to Washingtonian because Washingtonian serves the whole region. So looking back, and one of the reasons we've been successful is that Washingtonian, which started 50 years ago, which is
Right.
incredible.
Yeah.
Or 51 years ago now, was a truly local magazine when it started, because 50 years ago, Washington, the suburbs were nothing
Yeah.
compared to what they are now. And now it's grown incredibly to serve a region of 5 million people. So it's the magazine for DC, Montgomery County, Fairfax County, out into Prince William County, all over. And they've done incredibly well. But it also created opportunities because they're not truly local anymore. And so we publish Bethesda magazine, there's Arlington magazine, there's Alexandria magazine, there's Northern Virginia magazine. And so they've created opportunities to do hyper-local magazines. And advertisers in a local market, for the most part, they want to reach customers who are within 5 or 10 miles of their business.
Right.
And so, for instance, we get a lot of realtors and real estate brokerages and offices that advertise with us. Well, they don't care about reaching people in Virginia for the most
Right.
part. They want to reach people here. If we get retail advertising or even local bank advertising or financial, I'm thinking there's we get a lot of doctors and dentists. They're, for the most part, if you have going to your general dentist, you're not going to go to Virginia. And if you're in Virginia, you're not going to come here. We have been very fortunate in that we have really been able to get lots of truly local advertising. Virtually all of our readers are within 10 miles of every business, virtually every business that advertises with us.
So in terms of coverage, where do you think that Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat have come up short? Is it geographically, or is it particular issue-wise? Where do you think you've come up short?
So I think those are really good. That's a really good question. Let me talk geographically at first. We've come up short, knowingly come up short, just because we haven't had the resources to expand to some of these areas, but we will in the future, we believe. In particular, Up County and East County. Up County and East County are where there's large percentage of the population of the county, and the demographics of those regions generally are very different than Bethesda, Chevy Chase, Potomac. So it is absolutely one of the missions of the magazine that, since most of our readers are inside the bubble that we call it, the great bubble we live inside of Bethesda, Chevy Chase, Potomac, the vast majority of our readers are there. To let people know, our readers know, that just miles away, people are living very different lives, lives of hardship and fear. And so we actually do a lot of storytelling in the magazine, a lot of stories about what's happening outside the bubble. And so even though we don't yet serve those communities necessarily, like with a Bethesda Beat reporter, we will eventually. We focus a lot on those communities, especially with the magazine. But so geographically, we hope in the future for Bethesda Beat eventually to have a full-time Up County reporter and a full-time Silver Spring to East County reporter. I think in terms of areas of coverage, we've made it a priority to cover what's going on elsewhere in the county. But I think we need to do even more of it because there's so many complex issues the county is dealing with, and long-term trends are going to make these issues even more complex. We need to just address them more head-on. And over time, you don't address it once and then never go back to it because these issues are not going to go away.
And would you say social justice issues are part of this?
Absolutely. Montgomery County is a fascinating place. According to the county, 25 years ago, 75% of the residents were white. Now I believe it's 45%, and in 2045, it will be 25%. It is a remarkably diverse place. The reason I love living here the most is just the incredible diversity that's here, which makes for great opportunity for storytelling because there's so many fascinating stories out there.
So 2 questions. So one is, can you cover that as Bethesda Magazine? Can you cover that diversity in East County and Up County as Bethesda Magazine, right? Which is as you said, a bubble. The second part is, do the new owners now recognize this?
Oh, absolutely. Scott and Julian Copeland absolutely do. Their life is about serving the community. They started the Diener School 10, 15 years ago, which is a school for students with special needs. Then they, a year ago, launched Main Street, which is this incredible residential facility, nonprofit in Rockville, which is bringing together people, able-bodied people with physical and mental needs. They see this as another way to serve the community. That was really important to me. So we had long conversations about the needs of the county in terms of media coverage, and they totally agree that we need to do more. They might even feel it more. I feel it strongly. They might even feel it more strongly in terms of our need to push beyond the bubble and to not only write about it more for our readers, but to get readers outside of the bubble. One thing towards that is one of our goals in the future is to have, at least starting with a Spanish language reporter who is, it's probably starting, might be translating stories in Spanish, but eventually we want to have a reporter who is reporting in Spanish. So can Bethesda Magazine cover those areas? I think the magazine can. Washingtonian covers what's going on many places other than Philadelphia Magazine covers what's going on outside of Philadelphia. I think that we will be able to do that. It is a question of are the stories of interest to people outside the bubble. Bethesda Beat, frankly, Scott and Julian and I have not spent a lot of time talking about this. One thing is, we have been going back and forth about whether to change the name to Montgomery Beat. That is something that we will absolutely be addressing in the near future. In my mind, we will eventually have newsletters that go out every day. One will still be called Bethesda Beat. One could be called Rockville Beat, another could be Gaithersburg, another could be Silver Spring and East County, and another could be Up County. That's my dream. That's what we're hoping to get to.
Just like a replication of the Gazette model?
In a sense, it's like zoned editions. It really is. It is, the old newspapers used to have, there was probably 2/3 of the paper everyone got, and 1/3 was specific to that locale. So at my home, we got the Bethesda Chevy Chase edition, and the sports coverage was mostly of, local high schools and things. So the Silver Spring edition of the newsletter of Bethesda Beat would lead with Silver Spring stories, but you'd also get the main stories from, the overall coverage. So that's our goal.
Thank you so much, Steve Hull, for coming on I Hate Politics. I hope when you go walking and you're up in Rock Creek Parkway sometime near Aspen Hill, give me a shout out and I'll join you.
I would like that very much. Thanks for having me.
What lessons can we draw from my conversation with Steve Hull? First, there's little doubt that Bethesda, Chevy Chase, and Potomac The bubble, as Steve Hull calls it, is a lucrative market. Enough real estate brokers and doctors and dentists to advertise to make Bethesda magazine profitable very early on. 17 years later, as the magazine goes to new owners, the majority of the readers still come from the bubble. But Silver Spring, Tacoma Park, and parts of Rockville and Gaithersburg, now known as North Bethesda and North Potomac, are becoming commercially viable markets as well. There is another type of expansion that the new owners of Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat will have to foster. How to address stories about folks in the county that do not read the magazine, and whether that coverage necessarily from the outside is authentic. Second, a news organization to work has to balance a number of things. The profitable, glossy Bethesda magazine supports the Bethesda Beat, the hard news side, which requires an everyday newsroom. The popular entertainment stories subsidize local government coverage that has the fewest takers. The coverage of Bethesda real estate could subsidize social justice stories. But finding this balance between profitability and the inherent social commitment in journalism is a hard line to walk. Steve Hull could do it, but the Gazette newspapers, which closed in 2015, couldn't. It's hard to see any other Montgomery County media outlet, current media outlet, truly being able to do this. And if Bethesda Magazine does expand its operations, as Steve Hull has laid out on behalf of the new owners, they will meet competition. Third, as powerful and financially viable Bethesda Magazine is, it offered a membership subscription, just like NPR without the mugs, Steve called it. And the readers in the county took him up on it. Memberships rose from 400 to 1,200 during the pandemic. The pandemic also saw readership go up, but advertising fall, albeit modestly by 20%. But now, as the economy picks back up and advertising revenues return, Steve Hull is on his way out, but expects the new owners to stay true to his vision. One part of this is that Steve and the new owners need to figure out whether to rename Bethesda Beat as Montgomery Beat. And the decision raises the dilemma whether a media outlet named after one of the most expensive parts of the county, and in fact the country, can adequately cover the great inequality that exists a few miles away. This is not just a Montgomery County problem, but a national and an international one. To Steve and Susan Hull, good luck in your new ventures. I'll be back with Andrew Sondry, who is back with his Up-County report. Hey, Andrew, how are things going Up-County?
Good, Sunil. Thanks for asking. This week, I wanted to talk about recreation in the Up-County. In Germantown alone, you've got Top Golf, the King Barn Dairy Museum, and the Soccerplex. In Gaithersburg, you can visit the Gaithersburg Community Museum, go swimming at Bora Park, or go shopping and hit the bars at the Rio Washingtonian Center. There are plenty of outdoor wineries and breweries like Waters Orchard in Germantown, Sugarloaf Vineyard in Dickerson, Rockland's Farm and Winery in Poolesville. We've also got some of the best hiking trails Up-County, like Hoyle's Mill, throughout Black Hill Regional Park, Little Bennett Regional Park, Great Seneca Creek State Park, 10 Mile Creek, and the new Powerline Trail for biking, as well as, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the C&O Canal Trail along the western side of the county. If you're interested in historic sites and museums, you can visit the Montgomery County Agricultural History Farm Park in Durwood, Historic Button Farm in Germantown, Oakley Cabin Living History Site Museum in Brooksville, and the Sandy Spring Museum. There are also festivals and events like Oktoberfest in Germantown and Gaithersburg, the Montgomery County Agricultural Fair in Gaithersburg, and the annual book festival in Gaithersburg. There's a lot of them in Gaithersburg.
Wow, that's making me dizzy. Are all these activities outdoors?
No, not at all. We actually have a lot of indoor events at performances at places like Black Rock Center for the Arts or the Gaithersburg Arts Barn. You could visit the Sandy Springs Slave Museum and African Art Gallery, go indoor skydiving at iFly. I think that's also in Gaithersburg. Play a round of golf at Top Golf in Germantown, or check out the Art of Fire glass blowing studio in Laytonsville, all of which you can do on a rainy day. And
Glass blowing.
Yeah, glass blowing. It may not be unique to the Up County, but you've also got a lot of bowling alleys that are a lot of fun to go to.
What are your personal favorites?
Well, I live in Germantown, so Butler's Orchard's got to be at the top of my list. There's nothing like going out and like picking your own berries and then going home and baking a pie. But Butler's Orchard is not the only place in the Up County that you can do this. Homestead Farms and Rockland Farm in Poolsville and Rock Hill Orchard outside of Mount Airy are all great places that you can go to pick your own fruits for a pretty reasonable price.
How do you think these recreational opportunities Up County shape how you all see yourselves? Does this shape Up County culture?
Absolutely. Because of our proximity to the Ag Reserve, the Up County has a lot of these outdoor wineries and interactive animal sanctuaries and these things deeply ingrained in nature in a much greater abundance. And our residents have unlimited access to the networks of hiking and biking trails in the woods and through farmland. These places and the activities that we do in them in our non-working and non-schooling hours, of course, are unique to our Up County landscape and form the basis of how we see ourselves. We're a little more outdoorsy on the whole, and we're fixated on conservation, while at the same time being more dependent on cars because all of these activities are a little bit farther away and less accessible by transit. These are key components of the Up County community culture. A few weeks ago, I did a segment on placemaking, and I neglected to mention one of the key pieces of that story that I'd like to rectify now. While many of the small communities that make up the Down County have a lot more individual, distinct sense of place than their Up County counterparts, the Up County as a whole has a much more cohesive communal identity than the Down County as a whole. And I think that's due in large part to these recreational activities and to the Ag Reserve that they're mostly designed around, which fills the gap of the distinct community centers that both private developers and the planning board didn't see fit to invest in over the past 50, 60, 70 years.
I believe you're setting the record right and planning more segments like this about things going on Up County.
Yes. In the coming weeks, I intend to do a couple more segments about different parts of the Up County culture. In the meantime, I'd like to invite all of my friends from all over the county to come and explore these activities that I laid out in this segment. There's nowhere better to be than the Up County in springtime.
Well, I'm coming, Andrew. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Sunil.
That's all for this episode. New music for this episode came from Montgomery County native and now DC singer-songwriter Emily Hall. Emily is also an international educator who trains teachers in integrating music in the classroom. You can find her work on Spotify. I'm very much looking forward to showcasing local talent and especially local music students in the podcast. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone who wants to, please email us at ihppod@gmail.com or reach out on Twitter at ihppod. I hope you will subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and your home. See you next time.
To lift our consciousness if we want to experience the end of all our greed and live the lives we want to lead. Supply and demand's not so sustainable. Our planet's resources aren't able to keep living like this. So stand up and make a difference, 'cause freedom lives in your heart and in your mind. No country's borders can build the divide. No constitution's words can define our freedom. Comes from inside. Our freedom comes from inside.